My name is Maya Brooks, 34 years old, head chef and owner of the Olive Terrace, a fine dining restaurant in Chicago. Tonight marks the 9th anniversary of my marriage to my husband, Daniel Brooks. I had spent nearly 6 months planning every detail of this evening, myself hoping it might reignite something that had quietly gone cold between us. I personally selected Table 7, the one with the perfect view of the skyline shimmering over Millennium Park. I designed a 6-course tasting menu, with each dish tied to a moment in our love story. The bottle of Pol Roger champagne I ordered was Daniel's favorite, the one we shared the night we signed papers for our first apartment. I wore an amethyst silk dress, the exact shade he once said brought out my eyes. And in my hair, I pinned the small, snowflake-shaped clip, the first Christmas gift he ever gave me. I stood before the mirror in the lounge, reapplying my lipstick, taking one last breath. My heart beat faster as I looked at the time. He would walk in any minute now. I truly believed this night would be a turning point. Then my phone vibrated. Still smiling, I opened the message. I have to change tables tonight. I'm here with my colleague Talia. Please understand. I'll make it up to you another night with something really special. Just like that, every hope I'd spent months nurturing shattered. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but to me it all sounded far away. Distant. Fake. I stepped out of the lounge. My heels clicked against the polished floor. No one seemed to notice the tension on my face except for Damon, the bartender. Damon had worked with me since the beginning of the Olive Terrace. He met my eyes with a look of concern but said nothing. I took a seat at the bar, back turned to the room. Damon, I said quietly, pour me a glass of the Pol Roger. Without a word, he nodded and placed the golden liquid in front of me. I picked it up, but I couldn't bring it to my lips. I watched the bubbles rise and disappear. The taste in my mouth wasn't wine, it was bitterness. Then, I looked. I hadn't meant to, but the chandelier above table 12 caught my attention, and my eyes followed the light, and there he was. Daniel, sitting with Talia. They were laughing together, leaning in close. He pulled her chair for her. He whispered something that made her giggle and touch his arm. My grip tightened around the glass. Then my eyes landed on something that nearly made me gasp out loud. On Talia's wrist was a bracelet, not just any bracelet. It was my grandmother's vintage diamond bracelet, passed down to my mother, and then to me. The rose-cut stones shimmered under the lights, the floral clasp gleaming with a painful familiarity. I wore it on my wedding day. It was a family treasure, a legacy. And now, it was on her wrist. Why? When did Daniel take it? Did he even understand what it meant? Maya, you all right? Damon's voice grounded me. I didn't answer right away, just gave a small nod. Pour me another. He refilled the glass in silence. I held it, still not drinking. My hands needed something to do anything to stop them from trembling. I looked back. Daniel was pointing at the bracelet, clearly explaining something to Talia, who smiled as if she deserved to wear it, as if it had always been hers. The sting was sharp, but under it, something else started to rise. No more tears. No more passivity. That bracelet wasn't just jewelry. It was a signal. A reminder. It was time for me to act. I kept sitting there, quiet but watching. Then, I noticed something. Across the bar, near the far end, a man tall, mid-30s, neatly dressed, was staring at the same table. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning. His hand gripped his whiskey glass so hard his knuckles went white. I leaned toward Damon and asked softly, "Is he a regular?" Damon glanced over, shook his head. First time I've seen him. I couldn't look away. Something inside me clicked into place, the final piece of this terrible puzzle. I stood up, took my glass, and walked to him. He looked at me as I stopped beside him, confusion and tension in his gaze. "Are you also watching that table?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He extended a hand. "I'm Colin Wright. The woman sitting there with your husband, she's my wife." The air left my lungs. I gripped the edge of the bar to stay standing. "I'm Maya Brooks," I whispered. "The man with her is my husband." We didn't need to say anything more. In that moment, we understood we were both victims of the same betrayal. Colin let out a bitter exhale, eyes never leaving the table. She told me she had a business dinner, that it was with a female colleague. I believed her. I nodded slowly. Daniel said the same, that he had to meet with someone about a new investor, said it would run late, and he'd make it up to me. We stood in silence for a few seconds, the air thick with shared disbelief. At table 12, Daniel and Talia were entirely absorbed in each other's company, talking, smiling, clinking glasses, oblivious to the fact that both their spouses were just feet away watching everything. Then I noticed something. Talia reached into her handbag, subtle but practiced, and pulled out an envelope. She slid it discreetly across the table to Daniel, beneath the tablecloth. Daniel glanced around, then took it, slipped it into his inner suit pocket like it was second nature. My stomach turned. Colin's grip on his glass tightened. Why the hell did she just pass him something? I narrowed my eyes. I've never seen them exchange anything like that before. Whatever's in that envelope, it's not personal. Colin looked at me, a flicker of realization in his eyes. There's something more here, something that isn't just about cheating. I nodded slowly. We can't just sit here. We need to know what's going on. I can check our company accounts, Colin said suddenly. She's been overseeing some of the financials this past year after the market downturn. I let her help temporarily. What company? Right, Harlow. It's a family architecture firm. I'm CEO. I watched as he pulled out his phone and logged into their internal systems. His eyes scanned rapidly. Then he stopped. His face went pale. Colin swallowed. 3 transfers, each around 70, sent to a political fund under Daniel's name, spread out over 3 months. My jaw clenched. He's using your company's money? For what? Campaigning? It looks like it, Colin muttered, rage growing in his voice. He has no official ties to my firm. He's not on our books. She had no authority to send that money. A cold shiver ran through me. This wasn't just a love affair. It was fraud. Colin, I said carefully, if we react emotionally now, they'll spin this against us. They'll say we're jealous, paranoid, unstable. You're right, he said. We have to be smarter than them. I signaled for Damon again and whispered, ask Marco from security to come to me discreetly. Damon nodded and disappeared behind the bar. Colin's eyes were glued to his phone. Here's another one just last week, 80, labeled as consulting services. Except we never hired Daniel. They've been laundering money through your company. He nodded grimly. They've been doing this a lot longer than I thought. I placed a hand on his arm. They think they've gotten away with everything. Then it's time we show them they haven't, Colin said, his voice sharpening. The restaurant around us still buzzed with life. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, but none of it felt real. For us, the world had narrowed down to a single glowing table, and the 2 people sitting there, like they owned it. Colin placed his phone on the bar, showing the evidence clearly. They thought no one would check, that I wouldn't notice. My eyes didn't leave Daniel and Talia. I leaned in closer. Can your phone record audio? Colin opened a voice recording app and carefully placed the device on the bar, angling it toward them. If they talk about the transfers, we'll have proof. I didn't speak, just nodded. My gaze locked on that glittering diamond bracelet, my grandmother's bracelet, still sparkling on Talia's wrist like a trophy. I turned away, biting my lip. That piece of jewelry had weathered generations of hard women in my family, and now it had been reduced to part of someone else's seduction costume. How can they do this so openly? Colin asked. Because they think no one sees, I replied. And that arrogance is exactly what's going to destroy them. At that moment, Marco appeared near the back of the bar. He caught my eye, and I gave a small nod. 2 other plainclothes security staff began positioning themselves casually near table 12. They blended in, but I knew they were watching. Ready. Daniel leaned in, whispering something to Talia. She giggled again, brushing her hand over the bracelet. The way she touched it like it was hers made something snap in me. The pain was gone. Now there was only resolve. Colin glanced at his watch. They're wrapping up. I see it, I whispered. Daniel signaled the waiter. Talia adjusted her hair. Still smiling, still oblivious. They had no idea that their final moment of comfort was over. I turned to Colin, voice steady. When the bill arrives, we go. He nodded. Let's end this. We stood together, two people with everything to lose and everything to reclaim. As the waiter approached their table with the check, I could feel my pulse settle. For the first time that night, I wasn't scared. I was ready. The waiter laid the leather folder with the check gently on the table. Daniel picked it up, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, a subtle tension in his brow. Talia kept her carefree smile, casually reaching for her purse as if nothing could touch her. But everything was about to change. I rose from my bar stool, my hand brushing lightly over the untouched glass of champagne. Colin followed, standing tall beside me. We began walking toward them, each step heavy with truth. The soft lighting that once made the restaurant feel warm now seemed to expose every lie. Daniel looked up as we approached. His expression froze. Maya, he said, voice strained with fake surprise. You came. I thought you were in the kitchen. I didn't answer right away. My eyes dropped to Talia's wrist, where the bracelet still gleamed, my grandmother's bracelet. My mother's bracelet. Mine. I slowly pulled out a chair and sat down, my posture straight, my voice cool. I came to offer my congratulations, I said. It's a special evening after all. Talia laughed, nervously, tugging her sleeve down to hide the bracelet. But it was too late. I leaned in slightly. The bracelet, I assume Daniel told you it was just something that looked familiar? Talia glanced at him, suddenly unsure. Daniel gave a forced chuckle. It just reminded me of one you used to have. Must be a coincidence. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and opened a photo. A close-up of the bracelet's clasp, the tiny engraving, EL, Chicago 1000, 952. I held the image up next to her wrist. There was no mistaking it. This bracelet, I said, isn't just jewelry. It's a symbol of my family's strength, generations of women who endured storms and never bowed their heads. And now you're wearing it like an accessory in some cheap lie. Daniel said nothing. His face had gone slack, blinking quickly. Talia looked pale, ashen. Her hand dropped away from the bracelet. I wonder, I continued, besides my heirloom, how much of my property you've used to impress her? Silence. The atmosphere at the table had changed. The air was thick, the illusion unraveling. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to recover. Maya, you're overreacting. This is a professional meeting. Talia's helping me connect with new sponsors, that's all. A soft, humorless laugh escaped me. I turned and nodded to Colin, who stepped forward and placed his phone on the table. On the screen, transaction records. Clean, clear, irrefutable. 3 separate wire transfers totaling $214, 0 from Wright, Harlow to a political action committee, all under Daniel Brooks' name. Colin's voice was even low. Talia is my wife. She had no authority to authorize these transfers, and yet here they are. Talia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Daniel's face flushed, then paled again. His eyes darted around the restaurant, searching for escape. But there was none. I looked to Marco, our head of security, standing a few feet away. I gave a small nod. 2 plainclothes guards approached from either side, positioning themselves near the table, calm but unmistakably firm. I suggest you both stay seated, I said coolly. The check hasn't been paid, and I'd hate to call the police for a dine and dash, especially after everything else. Daniel slammed his palms onto the table. You're making a scene! he hissed. "Do you know what this could do to my reputation?" I leaned back in the chair, folding my arms. A real reputation doesn't need stolen jewelry or dirty money to prop it up. And if that's what you're afraid of losing, well, maybe you never had one. Colin didn't speak. He just stood there, calm and cold, like stone. Talia's hands trembled as she fumbled in her purse for a credit card. In her panic, she dropped the whole bag. Papers spilled out: receipts, lipstick, a folded envelope, and a memo. I picked it up. The letterhead read, "Right. Harlow Internal Transfer Request." It was labeled, "Discretionary funds, political outreach, no source listed." I scanned it. That was all I needed. Daniel tried to steady himself. His voice cracked, barely audible. "Maya, I did this for us, for our future. It's all temporary. I can explain." I met his eyes, calm now, stronger than I had felt in years. "Explain what? Exactly?" I asked. "The company funds you stole from Colin? The heirloom bracelet you gifted to your mistress? Or the property documents you tricked me into signing last month?" The restaurant was no longer quiet. Nearby guests were watching. Some had pulled out their phones. I saw screens glow, cameras recording, mouths whispering. Talia was shaking now. Her face had lost all color. She tried to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Only tears. Silent, hot tears. Colin stepped forward, voice cold but contained. "What did you think would happen, Talia? That I'd never check the accounts? That I'd stay blind forever?" Talia broke into sobs. Her shoulders shook, her hand still clutching the bracelet. The silence in the room cracked. As the flashes of phone cameras popped, the murmurs spread like wildfire. Daniel turned to me, voice pleading now, "Please, this is a misunderstanding." I didn't answer him. Instead, I reached across the table and unclasped the bracelet from Talia's wrist. The metal was cold in my hand, heavier than it looked. I fastened it onto my own wrist once more. The weight was familiar. "Right. This," I said clearly, "never belonged to you. It never will." Daniel tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. "My attorney filed the lawsuit this morning. A restraining order is being finalized. You'll never touch my property or my life again." Colin nodded in agreement and turned to Marco. "Make sure they don't leave until the check is paid. I'll be calling our attorney. Formal embezzlement charges start tonight." Marco gave a subtle signal, and the guards near the exit moved to their posts. Daniel collapsed back in his chair. Talia buried her face in her hands. The whispers from the other diners rose. "Isn't that Daniel Brooks? Did you get it on video? He gave his wife's bracelet to his mistress." I looked at them one last time, then turned and walked back to the bar. Colin walked beside me. We said nothing. There was nothing left to say. We returned to the bar in silence. My untouched champagne was still there, golden and glowing beneath the soft pendant lights. It sparkled next to my grandmother's bracelet, finally back where it belonged. I sat down slowly, feeling the weight of everything settle over me, but not in a crushing way. It was the weight of clarity, of justice. Colin sat beside me, pulled out his phone, and began typing. "Calling our company attorney," he said calmly. "He needs to start drafting charges for corporate embezzlement. We've got enough evidence already." I nodded. "I've sent everything to my lawyer as well. Video, financial records, the memo we found. It's more than enough to trigger legal action." Behind us, the restaurant buzzed in a strange hush. The atmosphere was no longer joyful, it was electric. Curious glances, quiet conversations, flashing screens. Daniel and Talia stayed frozen at the table, whispering frantically to one another. Talia still wiped tears away with shaking hands. Daniel had gone pale, looking around as if still hoping for a way out that no longer existed. The security staff held their posts, near the exits, calm, watchful, silent. They weren't going anywhere. "Do you want to press charges tonight?" Marco asked discreetly, stepping beside the bar. Not yet, I said, my voice firm. Let them sit in it. Let the weight of the moment sink in before the courts take over. Colin agreed. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any arrest warrant. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. They'd chosen my restaurant to carry out this betrayal. The same place Daniel once watched me build from the ground up. Where he once stood beside me for grand openings and anniversary dinners. Now it had become the place where his deception collapsed. I glanced around the room. No one had returned to their food. The staff had quietly slowed their service. The guests were still absorbing what had just happened. Daniel had underestimated everything. Me, Colin, the people watching. He thought we'd never speak up, that we'd protect him out of fear of scandal. But not tonight. Tonight, we reclaimed our dignity. And by morning, his illusion of power would be nothing but dust. Colin looked over. I know it's early to say this, but thank you. For what? I asked. For not backing down, he said. For letting truth take the stage tonight. I gave a faint smile. Same to you. He paused. You know, a few months ago, I would have sworn Talia would never do something like this. I would have bet my life on it. I looked down at my bracelet, its diamonds catching the light again. So would I have? About Daniel? There was a brief silence, not awkward, just real. The silence of two people who had watched their worlds crack and still stood on their feet. Then Colin's phone buzzed. He looked down. My attorney wants me to forward everything. He's pulling corporate board members into a meeting first thing in the morning. Mine will be filing a motion to freeze our joint accounts, I said. Daniel won't be able to touch a cent until this is settled. Outside the large front windows of the restaurant, the snow had started to fall. Soft flakes drifting past the glass like fragile, quiet witnesses. The calm after the confrontation felt strange, but also deserved. 6 months later, the olive terrace still lit up every evening. The tables filled, the kitchen alive, the wine flowing, but something about the space felt different now. Warmer. Lighter. I stood in the open kitchen, watching my team as they plated appetizers for a private event. Their laughter echoed over the counters. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was faking a smile. And on my wrist, the diamond bracelet. My grandmother's words echoed again in my mind. This isn't just jewelry, Maya. It's a reminder that we come from strong women. Women who survived and stood tall, even when the ground beneath them gave way. After the fallout from that night, I bought out Daniel's stake in the restaurant. I had our attorneys draft the papers quickly, while his reputation was still collapsing under the weight of public scrutiny. He had no leverage, no platform, no dignity left to bargain with. The footage from the restaurant went viral the very next day. People shared it with hashtags like Diamond Justice and Chef Strikes Back. Local news picked up the story. A few guests from that night even gave interviews about what they saw. Daniel's image, once polished, charming, confident, disintegrated overnight. His sponsors pulled out. His political ambitions sank. And eventually, under the pressure of financial fraud allegations from Colin's firm, he was forced to resign from public life altogether. As for Talia, her involvement in the embezzlement couldn't be denied. Colin pressed formal charges. The Wright Harlow board voted unanimously to remove her from any decision-making roles. The company's reputation recovered slowly, but surely in large part thanks to Colin's calm leadership during the storm. He and I stayed in touch. There was no romance between us, only mutual respect and a bond forged in fire. Most evenings, he'd stop by the restaurant and we'd sit at the bar, drink quietly, talk about rebuilding, not just careers or reputations, but selves. He once told me, betrayal doesn't just break trust, it shatters your reflection. You have to rebuild how you see yourself first, before you can face the world again. He was right. But by then, I already had. It happened on a quiet Tuesday. The kind of morning where you wake with no alarm, just light streaming through the curtains, and the calm knowing that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. I stood barefoot in the kitchen of my grandmother's house, the one I once feared I'd lose because of Daniel's lies. The one he tried to tie up in shady paperwork under the pretense of financial restructuring. Thanks to my lawyer, it was now fully in my name. Mine. Every tile, every creaky floorboard, every memory. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the trees sway through the window. For the first time in years, my shoulders weren't tight with tension. My chest didn't carry the familiar ache of holding back tears, or anger, or doubt. I was at peace. Not because life was perfect, but because everything I had lost, I had taken back. My home, my restaurant, my name, and most importantly, my self-worth. The divorce had finalized faster than expected. Public pressure does that. The financial evidence, the video footage, the press attention. Daniel's team couldn't spin it. He signed everything over with barely a whimper. He knew he was finished. He moved to a quiet suburb in Iowa, working at his cousin's insurance firm. The man who once hosted galas and tried to charm political donors with his polished speeches now filed home damage claims for retirees. I never heard from him again. And I didn't want to. As for Talia, the courts gave her a suspended sentence after a plea deal, but she was stripped of financial access to Colin's company permanently. Her public apology broadcast on local news couldn't erase what she'd done. Colin was left to pick up the pieces of her deceit, not as a husband, but as a CEO trying to protect his legacy. He did it with dignity. And quietly, just like me. Back at the Olive Terrace, everything began to thrive. Word spread about the woman who stood up during betrayal, who didn't scream or fall apart, but exposed the truth with calm precision. Guests came in not just for the food, but for the story. They wanted to dine in the place where a woman said, "Enough." The local paper featured a piece titled, "The Chef Who Served Justice with Champagne." Another ran a column headlined, "Betrayed but Not Broken. Maya Brooks' Recipe for Resilience." Those headlines embarrassed me at first, but then I started to own them. Because I realized something simple and profound. Strength doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's the quiet click of heels walking toward truth. Sometimes it's a hand reclaiming a bracelet once stolen. Sometimes it's a woman standing in her own restaurant saying, "I built this, and no one will take it from me." Colin and I would often meet once or twice a week. He'd stop by after meetings, or I'd send over coffee to his office on particularly rough days. We never crossed a line. No romantic tension. No unspoken promises. Just understanding. We had walked through different fires, same heat. That creates a bond not easily broken. Sometimes we sat in silence at the bar, just watching people enjoy their meals. Other times, we talked about the absurdity of the headlines, or the emotional roller coaster of betrayal, or the pressure of leadership after crisis. One night, after finalizing the restaurant's expansion paperwork, I said, "You know what I miss the least?" Colin raised a brow. "What's that?" "Having to shrink to make someone else feel tall." He smiled slowly. "Yeah, I know that feeling too well." There was no need to say more. That was the night I realized I hadn't just reclaimed my property or my dignity, I'd reclaimed my voice. One evening, about 6 months after everything unfolded, I stood in the kitchen preparing a dessert tasting for a group of regulars. I wore my chef's coat. My sleeves were rolled. The smell of caramel and citrus filled the room. And as I reached for a garnish, the light hit my wrist and the bracelet shimmered. I paused, just for a second, and smiled. Not a smile of pride, or victory, or revenge. Just peace. This bracelet had been through decades of quiet sacrifice, carried by the hands of women who worked double shifts, raised children alone, buried grief, and kept going. It had lived in the shadows of strong women who never got their applause. Now it rested on my wrist, no longer hidden, no longer mistaken for someone else's. Mine. I had earned the right to wear it again, not as Daniel's wife, not as the betrayed woman in a viral video, But as Maya Brooks' chef, survivor, owner, daughter, granddaughter, woman, the Olive Terrace glowed under the soft amber lights, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside clashing with the chilly Chicago evening air. From the outside, it looked like any other elegant restaurant, laughter drifting, wine pouring, candles flickering. But inside, it was so much more. It was my fortress. It was where I had lost nearly everything, and then found something even greater. Myself. I stood in the kitchen watching my team as they plated tonight's final course. The room smelled of burnt orange and chocolate. Knives clinked softly against porcelain. The voices of the servers mixed with the music low jazz, always just a little nostalgic. And there on my wrist, catching the light of the overhead lamps, was the diamond bracelet. No longer a stolen token. No longer a symbol of betrayal. Now, it was a badge of legacy and survival. The journey since that night had been difficult, but every step had been worth it. Buying out Daniel's steak gave me full control of the restaurant. I redesigned the interior, updated the kitchen, and renamed the wine lounge Lucille's in honor of my grandmother. When I told my mother about it over the phone, she cried quietly and said, "She'd be so proud of you, Maya. You didn't just survive. You honored us." That meant more than any review, more than any headline, more than any viral moment. Because in the end, this wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. It was about never again letting someone steal what belongs to you, not just your money or your property or your family heirlooms, but your voice. As for Daniel, he faded from the public eye completely. After resigning from his position, he tried to spin the story, claimed it was a complicated misunderstanding and a coordinated smear. But the public didn't buy it. Neither did the donors. Without a platform, without sympathy, he slipped quietly into obscurity. Last I heard, he was helping file insurance claims and teaching entry-level business classes at a community college. His once polished voice now rarely heard beyond his immediate surroundings. No apologies, no closure, just silence. And honestly, that was enough for me. Talia disappeared from the spotlight as well. Colin followed through with his legal action, but he never did it from malice. He told me once, "Accountability isn't vengeance. It's clarity." She needed to face what she did, and so did I. He rebuilt right, Harlow's name with steady hands and a stronger team. He told me the first month was hard, like trying to patch a boat while still sailing it. But he did it quietly, decisively. Like always, we stayed in touch. A few text messages, occasional check-ins. One night we bumped into each other at a fundraiser and shared a laugh over the irony the fundraiser was for a Women's Financial Independence Foundation. "I guess we're both cautionary tales," I said. He smiled. "No, we're both proof that stories can be rewritten." I stood at the pass that night, watching the last dessert leave the kitchen. A single scoop of lemon rosemary gelato over almond shortbread. It was my grandmother's favorite, a recipe she passed to my mother and now lived on through me. The server disappeared into the dining room, and I was left alone. For a moment, I just closed my eyes. The hum of the lights, the clatter of dishes, the scent of sugar and citrus. Peace. The kind you can't fake. The kind that only comes after you've walked through a storm and come out cleaner than you thought possible. I learned something important from this entire chapter of my life. The greatest strength of a woman is not in how much she can endure, but in knowing when to stop enduring and start reclaiming. I used to think sacrifice made love more noble. That being quiet, forgiving, and patient made me stronger. But silence isn't strength. Truth is. And now, I speak mine in every dish I serve, every smile I give, every contract I sign, every time I reach for the bracelet on my wrist and feel the cold metal warming to my skin. I didn't just win. I remembered who I was. So, to anyone reading this, or listening to this, or sharing it with someone else, if you've ever been lied to, underestimated, taken for granted, betrayed in the darkest way? You don't have to lose yourself. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to disappear. You can stand up even when your hands are shaking. You can walk into a room full of people and say, "That's enough." And you can rebuild everything they tried to take from you. Brick by brick. Flame by flame. Bracelet by bracelet. What do you think of my story? Would you have handled it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever faced betrayal and come out stronger, I'd love to hear your story too. Follow this channel for more true, empowering stories about life, resilience, and the strength we often forget we hold until someone tries to take it away.